I want to play now some sound from PBS NewsHour White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor about the administration's response to the uptick in migrants arriving at the U.S. Mexico border.
Is there a timeline for when we won't be seeing these overcrowded facilities run by CPB when it comes to unaccompanied minors?
The overwhelming majority of people coming to the border and crossing are being sent back. We're providing for the space, again, to be able to get these kids out of the Border Patrol facilities, which no one should be in any longer than 72 hours. We're building back up the capacity that should have been maintained and built upon, that Trump dismantled. It's going to take time.
Zolan, you've covered immigration for years, including a lot of time down at the border. Help us fact check what we heard yesterday. The president said there's nothing new here. This is just the normal seasonal increase we see all the time. In fact, it was even larger as a percentage under President Trump. But his own Secretary of Homeland Security says we may see the largest migrant surge in 20 years, and his own vice president said this is a, quote, big problem. So help us sort through this. What's going on here?
One thing we absolutely know is that the arrivals at the border are likely to continue and increase. We're already seeing that through March. Now, let's talk about what the president was just referring to there. As we discussed earlier, he has been getting criticized. And one of the things he's been getting criticized for his administration's handling and treatment of unaccompanied minors that he is welcoming into the U.S. And he has been criticized as, by Republicans as not being tough enough at the border. So his response has been to say, well, let's remember, the administration is still expelling using a pandemic emergency rule. That, I may add, was implemented by President Trump in March. He is using that pandemic emergency rule to expel single adults, and the administration's intention is to rapidly turn away, to expel families as well, mainly families from Central America. But here's the thing. While that might be their intention, they need the cooperation of Mexico to do that. And what has happened since about January, after Mexico passed a recent law that prohibits the detention of young immigrant children in their facilities, Mexico, and I should add also a lack of shelter capacity along the Mexico side of the border, Mexican authorities have stopped basically accepting some of those families that the United States is trying to rapidly turn away. So that means there are more families being released into the United States than there were months ago. He is the president. That was a false statement when he says that a vast majority of families are being returned at this time. And I do think it's important to also tell the viewers here. I mean, this brings up a question for the president as well. I mean, he campaigned on restoring asylum at the border, and while he has broken away from the Trump administration in welcoming in children, he is still using that pandemic rule that was criticized by now Vice President Harris. He's still using that rule and intending to use it for adults and families fleeing poverty and persecution in Central America. So what will be interesting going forward is how long he relies on that rule and what potential backlash he gets from continuing to use that rule, as well as what the plan is when he can no longer use it.
Ashley, all new presidents like to blame their troubles on their predecessor. It was just a few weeks ago, of course, we heard President Biden say he was tired of talking about Donald Trump, who was the former guy, as he called him at the time. But yesterday, he didn't seem tired of talking about him. He wrote in the Washington Post that he mentioned Trump by name 10 times yesterday. And of course, he said at one point, my predecessor, oh God, I miss him. Now, we all thought that was a joke, but maybe it's not a joke. Do you think there's a possibility that he actually does miss President Trump, at least as a unifying force for his coalition, as a foil for any troubles that he might have?
Well, it is Democrats and Republicans, as you said, they always blame their predecessor. That's sort of a political rule, time immemorial. And Biden does legitimately seem eager to move past, as he called him, the former guy. This was their campaign strategy that helped get him elected, which was to largely ignore then President Trump and not really elevate or engage him. And that is something Biden has done largely until that press conference, where not only did he mention him 10 times by name, but in 7 different sort of instances, on immigration 3 times, on Afghanistan, on human rights, on taxes. So it was a range of issues. To be fair to President Biden, he mentioned him unprompted sometimes. About half of those exchanges, the media did bring up former President Trump, asking Biden to respond to something he had said. But you did get this sense, and it's quite understandable, that for Biden with Trump, it is personal. This is someone who went after his son, Hunter, repeatedly during the campaign. Biden always likes to boast that he is the rare Irishman who does not hold grudges, but it seems as if former President Trump may be the exception that proves that rule.